Welcome to the Inside Scoop Live podcast, where indie authors get personal about their books, their writing, and their passions. I'm your host, Sherry Hoyt. Join me for some lively conversations with debut indie authors and seasoned veterans alike. It's a great place to find your next amazing read or even get inspired. So sit back and enjoy the show and let me know what you think. Hi everyone, Alice McVeigh joins me today to talk about her book, Ghost Music. It's a psychological literary novel with paranormal elements exploring the intense world of orchestras as a cellist confronts the haunting connection between his instrument, personal ghosts, and identity. Before we get started, here's the inside scoop on the author. Alice McVeigh has been published by Orion Hachette in contemporary fiction, by UK's Unbound using a pen name in sci-fi, and now in multi-award-winning Austenesque fiction. Her books have been honored at the most recent London Book Fair and the UK Selfies Book Awards, runners-up for the prestigious Foreword Indies Book of the Year, and joint runner-up for Writer's Digest ebook awards. She is married and lives in London. Previously, she played all over the world with London orchestras, including the BBC Symphony and the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, which inspired this work. You can learn more about Alice McVeigh and her work at alicemcveigh.com. Well, hi, Alice. Welcome to Inside Scoop Live.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm very honored.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to talk with you. I know we've reviewed a number of your books over the years at Reader Views, so it's nice to finally connect. Let's talk about your book, Ghost Music. What can you tell us about it, and what inspired you to write the book?
I think it was inspired first by a dream I had where I'm a professional cellist in London, where I believe that a cello was playing me. It was also inspired by a lot of experiences I had in the 1990s because it was first Big Five published back then. And this is a second edition that's now happening. But basically, what I felt there was something rather weird about the feeling between a player and the instrument. And I wanted to explore that.
Your dream. I love your dream. It sounds like you could have gone so many different ways with a story with that kind of dream, but
Yes.
horror is not your thing. So
What I felt I had to have time to process everything that happened to me in that period. The 1990s were very tumultuous for me. I come from America, and within a year, been married to an English person. I'd never lived in England, and I was suddenly the enemy. I was suddenly trespassing on British cellist territory. And I felt really upset about that. And I even said to Simon, my husband, I said, can't you help me out here? And he was going, well, no, because it still is an academic, a famous academic, a musicologist. And that's how we met. But he's not a performer. He doesn't perform. He writes about music. He had no way of assisting me. And I felt let down in that way. And it was difficult for us. And then after that, we had another really traumatic period when we were infertile. And that led to me losing my major publisher, Orion Hachette. I was really fortunate because I've always been a writer, but I didn't know I was. And so anyway, I fired off this novel, While the Music Lasts, and I sent it off to 3 major agents, 2 of whom wanted it. This is unheard of. And I just thought I've been wasting my life with a cello, which I probably had done. But anyway, never mind. So the point is I did that. And within a month and a half, I had a major publisher as well. And this was crazy. And I was sitting here, a cellist, with this major chance opening up before me, and I seized it. I did the best I could. And the first novel did really well, While the Music Lasts. And the second novel, this one, Ghost Music, did almost as well. But then I was sunk by my infertility issues. I couldn't finish the third one that I was contracted to do. So I got fired by my publisher. So that was kind of mega for me. And it sunk me for several decades because even though I had my daughter, and she's amazing, I didn't have the authority to myself to write. I thought I was a failure at it.
Oh.
So what happened after that was, once my daughter went to Oxford, I found myself freed to start to write, but it was still difficult until I got my ADHD diagnosis in my early 50s. And that completely released all the problems I had. Once I was medicated, I can write. And now I just feel so amazing about it. I just feel so amazing. I feel as if I haven't wasted my life because I have my daughter and she's phenomenal. And also, I did other stuff in between. I did lots of ghostwriting in between. But I feel freed and I feel lucky and I feel gifted and I feel blessed.
Yeah, yeah. What an amazing journey. Wow.
Thank
I love how you said I've been a writer the whole time. I just didn't know it. I love that because I don't know, I think people feel like, well, I'm going to go sit down and write a book. And then if you don't really know what you're doing, how does one do that?
I actually think a lot of people do it and really well. But if they're at the wrong age or the wrong sex or the wrong gender or the wrong color, this may tell against them. I mean, I was born a writer because my parents are writers. My
Hmm.
uncle was a scriptwriter in Hollywood. And when I was 4 and my sister was 3, I wrote stories for her. And I finished my first novel at 13. It was a terrible novel. It was diabolically awful. It was so bad I can't believe it. But I still finished it. How many people finished their first novel at 13? Not very many. So I was always a writer, but I fought it because I wished to be a cello player.
Hmm.
And that was because my parents wanted me to be a cello player. They were proudest of that. And they were so musical themselves, though not musicians. My father was a civil servant, and that's how come I grew up in Asia. And he was in the State Department. And my mother was a editor, a very distinguished
Hmm.
editor. But basically, that wasn't what they wanted me to do. They wanted me to be the golden, glowing cello player. And I was so inspired by Jacqueline du Pré, because Jacqueline du Pré, I heard play in the Kennedy Center when I was about 12, and I said, that's what I want to do. And I
Hmm.
dedicated the next 10 years of my life to do that because I wanted to be Dupre. And then I got to study with her, or at least I thought I got to study with her, because I did very well at music college and we had a mutual connection. And she accepted me by tape. But then before she ever met me, she said she couldn't teach anymore because she had MS, multiple
Mm.
sclerosis to such a degree, she couldn't teach anybody. So there were 7 of us from 4 continents, and we were all moved to her own teacher, William Pleath. So in some
Oh,
ways that was amazing because he was a phenomenal teacher, but she was always my inspiration as a cellist, as a person, and I just feel so sad I just missed out.
yeah. Wow. You've had quite the experiences. Let's talk a little bit about ghost music. You said it's the second edition. You described an orchestra as the combination of the unlikely and the insufferable, attempting the impossible. What does that mean, and how does that idea play into your story?
I love the fact, Sherry, that you picked that out because it's always been one of my favorite quotes. But it wasn't actually me who said it, it was my narrator who said it. The sane, relatively sane orchestral manager, Pete Hagel, who said it. He expressed my thoughts perfectly because I do think that you need to be slightly diseased as a person to pursue this as a profession. And I also feel that it's impossible for 100 people to express perfection simultaneously. There will always be people out of that 100 gifted artists
Hmm.
who will be suffering in some mega way. They will be feeling low. Their spouse will have left them. Their kid might have died. Something will have happened. It's so unbelievably hard for everybody to feel completely immersed in the experience. I mean, it's crazy. The ask that is asked of orchestras is crazy,
Hmm.
and we're so badly paid. And I just feel that what I was trying to express in both of the books I wrote about orchestras was this kind of way in which it impacts upon the personal psyche, the personal self belief, and just the stress of being on stage while suffering, because
Mm.
we all suffer, God knows. But We don't all suffer on stage. And I have seen people perform brilliantly when they just had a miscarriage, when their husbands just left them. I have seen people do this, and I think it's a heroism.
Yeah. Some people just also can deal better under pressure. I'm not one of those people, but I know it's
No,
done.
yeah,
Yeah.
are they?
Now, you talked about your dream where the cello played you. I can't get past that. I wonder if
No,
I'm going to have a dream about it.
I would be surprised, but also honored. I still remember the dream. Most of my novels have come out of dreams. I wrote a speculative fiction book under a pen name that
Hmm.
came out of a dream that I had of a man, of looking down a tunnel from the earth to a young man, a black guy, imprisoned deep under the earth. And that was the genesis of that book. So I am a great dreamer.
Mm.
And the dream I had of the cello was much less specific. It was, in fact, rather sad. It was as if I didn't want to play, but the cello was determined. It was dominating me in a way that probably meant that the partner I was with at the time was dominating me. Not my husband, hasten to add, he's great. But basically, I do think there was something of that in it.
Mm.
And I think that I felt dominated and I felt driven and I felt deeply unhappy in that dream. But at the same time, it opened up a field of thought to me, because I am a writer, of a cello having that kind of power over someone or something. And that was where it happened.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Now, the Orchestra of London in your book, that's a fictional orchestra, but it feels incredibly authentic. How much of the novel is actually based on your experiences touring?
Well, that's a very leading question, which I'm not willing to answer. But which I am willing to say is that I think that my years as a London cellist taught me a lot about human nature.
Mm.
And it wasn't mostly good. There's a lot of rivalry, there's a lot of dissension, there's a lot of misogyny. And especially in my time, now it's got much better. When I was playing with various famous London orchestras, like the BBC Symphony, the Royal Philharmonic, London Mozart players, what have you, then it was mostly male dominated.
Mhm.
Now it's the opposite. So it's become much more civilized and full of knitting people. And, it's completely different. But in my time, it was predatory. I even had one person come up to me in a famous orchestra, this was abroad in Europe, and say, "You're only on this tour because I said I wanted you on it. Think about it." Now,
Mm.
if that is predatory, I don't know what is. It
Wow.
was just terrifying. I was a young married woman. I was trying to get pregnant by my husband. It was all really, really difficult. And I just feel that in those days, it was really tough. I'm not
Mhm.
saying it's not tough now. It's even tougher in some ways. There's less work. But I think people are much fairer now. I don't think it's so male dominated. I don't think it's anything like it was to that degree. It's kind of like music colleges. When I was at music college, I was abused by one of my teachers.
Mm.
Now they have little windows in front of every door, so anyone can look in and see if somebody's being imposed upon.
Oh, right. Yeah.
They didn't have that when I was coming along. So I think in many ways things have got way better. I also feel that people have got better, not generally, otherwise we wouldn't have the politics we have now. But I feel that
Right.
people generally are much more intuitively sympathetic to gender differences, to trans, to especially in music. We're very, very open minded
Mm.
in the music profession. And I've never heard a word said against anything of that nature in the music profession, ever.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about your protagonist, William.
Yes, I think what makes him tick is an open heartedness, which is almost fatal. I think that he is completely open hearted. He's
Mm.
just open to everything. And I think that is almost fatal, because when Isabel approaches him and basically lays a snare for him, he falls for it, and he ought not to have fallen for it, and he knows he ought not to have fallen for it, but there's still something irresistible about it because he's that open-hearted.
Mm.
And I think this is rare for a guy, but not so much in music. I think there are lots of musicians who are like this,
Hmm.
of every sex. And as I think I said to you privately, I said I was accused of being Isabel, the beautiful, amazing viola player who entrances him. I am not Isabel. I am instead his best friend, mentor, and provocateur, Piotr, who is A, foreign like me, Russian, B, crazy like me, C, ADHD like me. That is who I really am. But I completely am pulling for William. And in this book in particular, he comes to his own. He takes control, which he failed to do in the first book, though they're standalone books. He failed to take control in it. Here, he comes into his own self. He accepts what has happened to him. He accepts everything, and he stands up to it.
Nice. Go, William. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Now,
not William. I'm proud of William.
yes, that's right. You talk about the music. I want to say the cello is a character itself, and the music most certainly is a character in ghost music. It shapes identities and relationships and reality, even. And I think I also was feeling some Shakespearean themes, power, betrayal, supernatural. Was that intentional, or did it kind of emerge naturally while you were writing it?
I was reading a lot of Shakespeare when I wrote it. And that's why I decided to have each chapter headed by a quote from Shakespeare, from Pete Hagel, who was the sane, intelligent, the guy who holds the whole orchestra together, the orchestra manager, the failed violinist.
Mm,
Maybe I identified with him. I don't know. What I feel is Shakespeare's always spoken to me. I felt that to have it speak to him was important because he, as I say, is the glue that holds the book together. And I feel that it mattered to me that that was the case. But also, he does quote it quite a lot to other people. It becomes a bit of a joke. People start laughing at him. And I get that because, I mean, if one was to do that as an orchestra manager, people would laugh at you. And I never met an orchestra manager that did. But I met a lot of very sane orchestra managers. That's why I thought he was kind of the hero of the book. No, William's the hero of the book, but he's the secondary hero of the book because
yeah.
he maintains his composure despite the worst, things that happen.
Right. Now, you've got ghosts throughout the story. William's not the only character. Literal and figurative ghosts. Many of the characters seem haunted by their past in different ways. How did you approach writing these layers of kind of personal history and emotional baggage?
I hope I did well. I think I did badly. It was difficult because the conductor's ghosts had to be stopped until the end. They had to
Mm,
be delayed until the end. And that was part of the plot. But I passionately believe that we all have ghosts in our pasts. I have loads of ghosts in mine.
mm,
I was talking about this today to a cello pupil. I was saying, I have two cello teachers in my past, both of them haunt me. One of them, Robert Hofmeckler, bless him, he lost his whole family in Auschwitz.
mm.
I thought he was ancient when I was my teacher, but he was only about 60. So about my sort of age now. And I thought he was just ancient, but he still had this past. And then I moved from him onto another cello teacher I will not name, who was drafted by the Nazi youth into the army at the age of 15, showed up with his cello. That was how naive he was
Mm.
sent out to the Russian front, taken prisoner by the Russians, and almost starved to death. In other words, what I feel is I think that we all have this idea that these things happen to other people, but they happen to people we know,
Hmm.
at
Yeah.
least in my case. And I
Yeah.
was young, admittedly, but it still hit me forcibly. And neither of them spared me. They both told me viscerally what they endured. And I'm grateful for that. I think it enriched me as a writer.
Mm, yeah. So you talked about the orchestral world, and it sounds incredibly, competitive
Mm.
and
It's way worse now in here.
difficult. Yeah, yeah.
It's way worse now. We thought we were really hard up because when we tried to have London orchestras, there were 110 other cellists against us. Now it's about 330. I mean, it's crazy.
Oh, wow.
I have a godson who's incredibly gifted at the cello, and I don't know if he's going to get a job or not. He ought to, but so ought a lot of other people. So it's got worse. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. As an American playing in British orchestras, did you ever feel like an outsider? And was that something you intentionally reflected in your book?
I think in Piotr I did, to be honest, Sherry. I'll be
Mm.
honest with you. What I feel is I think that I related to Piotr so much because he was foreign, he was Russian. And that would have felt pretty much as weird as an American in London at the time. Now there are more Russians. There are fewer Americans, probably,
Mm.
but there's still some, you know. I just feel that the outsider part of it was something I wanted to explore. I also feel that I didn't normally feel as an outsider simply because I've always been an outsider. I grew up in Asia and I mostly went to British schools, which helped me a great deal when I came here. And I read mostly British books. But in the meantime, I had mental and nervous breakdowns as a teenager in America where we did not fit in. My mother, who was very rigorous, said, "You are not wearing jeans to school. That is outrageous." We were the only people not wearing jeans to high school. I mean, it was just really, really difficult. I'm here to
Mm.
tell you. As somebody who came from Asia and British schools to American high school, it was awful.
Oh, yeah. What a
Um,
time,
and,
too. High
and
school.
without the cello, yes, exactly. And without the cello, I think I wouldn't have made it. But luckily, I turned out to be so good at the cello. That was my kind of identity. And that was what I did. And then when I came to Britain, I came for 1 year to study the Dupre. And as I say, she was too ill to teach any of us that year. But I met my husband to be, almost immediately within 4 months of moving here. And I was married within 12 months. My whole life just changed. And I felt much more comfortable here than I had ever felt in America.
Hmm.
I've never fully felt American, having grown up till I was 12 in Asia and having grown up since I was 22 in London. I've always felt a kind of resistance.
Mm-hmm.
It
Well,
doesn't feel like it's really me. And people say my accent is sinking in the middle of the ocean. And I know it's sinking in the middle of the ocean. If I go to America, everybody says, "You sound so British." If I come here, everybody's going, "Are you American or Canadian?" And people have said to me, because I've got this Kickstarter going about audiobooks, "You're so artistic. Just read it yourself." I'm going, my accent is hopeless.
I love it.
Yeah,
Yes, you should definitely do
I'm very weird.
audiobooks. Yeah. Oh, I love the excerpts that you shared with me.
Thank you.
Sharp, witty, a little cheeky. I'm guessing that's a little bit like you, huh? But ghost music is both kind of satirical and sexy. How do you strike that balance in your writing?
I have trouble with the sexy bit, to be honest, not with ghost music or While the Music Lasts. I have a lot of trouble with Jane Austenesque
Mm.
fiction because she never touched even on the little borders of sex. She didn't do. Nobody ever kisses in her books. You know, if somebody grasps someone's hand, it's a big deal.
Mm.
So that's hard for me to deal with because when I was writing my orchestral novels, the ones we're talking about, I could be not full on, but I could suggest quite a lot more. Whereas with her, I feel that's untrue to her legacy and unfair. Being satirical is quite easy. I have to say that's kind of a strength. But being sexy, I have to rein myself in when I'm doing historical fiction because I don't think it's appropriate and I think she would hate it. And
Hmm.
I also have this dream. We were talking about dreams before. I have met Jane Austen in dreams. And my greatest dream is that when I meet her, which I'm sure I will at some point in some other life or else the life thereafter,
Hmm.
that she says to me, "You did well." That's my greatest dream.
Oh my goodness. Oh wow.
And I'm so afraid that won't happen, that it always holds me back sexually. I'm always going, "No, no, no, don't go there." She would hate it. She
Mm.
was not only, I believe, not interested in that, but she detested it. She was always on the side of being held back and delicacy. I mean, you can suggest it in what people might feel, but not in what they might say or do. And I think where people go wrong so often in this kind of fiction is they go overboard, and she would hate it. And she's just sitting with her arms folded. I feel this kind of visceral connection.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, she would hate some of the books out there now.
I think she would hate some of the books going out there now, but so do,
Yeah.
lots of people. And that's people's choice. They're entitled to do what they're entitled to do. But
Right.
I just feel that with the books that I've written that we're talking about, I could be entirely myself. And
Yeah.
that's why you asked me if there's going to be a third one. I hope there will be a third one.
Hmm.
It will be more of a thriller.
Oh.
it's going to take a slightly different direction, but with the same characters. But I don't have the time to do it because of all the stuff I have to mess about with in terms of promoting the others. And I think this is where I went wrong in doing not just one or two, but three genres. I've had to abandon my science fiction thriller, even though I got a Kirkus star and a lot of awards,
Mm.
because I haven't been able to find any way of finishing it. Or sequelizing it. So that's just dwindling. And I've thrown my heart and soul and all my energies into Jane Austen-esque fiction. So the orchestral ones have really suffered. And that upsets me. So at the moment, I'm busy doing their paperback versions. And I'm
Okay.
not going to let them dwindle indefinitely. And at some point, I will finish the story that I began, I promise, if anybody's interested.
Yeah. So this is a re-release. Did you have to rewrite any part of it?
I didn't have to, but I chose to,
Okay.
because when I was in my 30s, I was really bored in the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, in the BBC Symphony. It sounds so arrogant. I was so bored. And I'll tell you why I was bored. I was 12th cellist out of 12. I had no agency. What I wanted, nobody listened to. I had to do exactly what my section leader told me to do, what the conductor told me to do, and I hated it. And I was sitting here going, no, I'm going to be rebellious. I'm going to write a book. And so I wrote a book. And this is the most crazy story. It was 1994. And I sent it off to 3 agents, and 2 of them accepted me. This is insane.
Yeah.
I know I'm good, but this is insane. There was not so much competition back then. Anyway, so the one who accepted me was very amazing. And she got me a contract with a big 5 publisher within 2 months. And these days, again, unheard of.
Right.
But basically, that was just the most amazing thing that had ever happened to me. My father said, go sleep with your agent. I said, she's a woman. Anyway, the point is, I'm very non-gay, though I have a lot of gay characters and a lot of gay friends. But basically, anyway, yeah. So I said to my agent at that point, I said, I have this huge connection with Jane Austen. And she just said, don't even go there. It's derivative. It's
Mm.
boring. It's pathetic. And I felt so sad. And it took me until she dumped me for my infertility and not finishing the series and so forth, to get over that.
Yeah. So you self-published all your Jane Austen books and
I
then
had. I didn't need to. I had offers from not important publishers, not as good as Hachette, but I had offers. And I went to the Society of Authors and I said, what should I do? Please help me, because they're amazing. And they looked at the contracts and they said, you could do as well on your own. They're taking too much royalties.
Mhm.
They're perfectly legitimate, but they're taking too many royalties for what they can probably afford to do in, publicizing your books. So I'm so glad I listened.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
They were amazing. I think everyone should join the Society of Authors if you're serious about writing.
Okay, okay. What are you working on next? Are you working on something new?
I'm working on my 5th Jane Austen one, and I
Nice.
am enjoying it because the character involved is so similar to me. But there's part of me that just gets restless and I want to do something new. And I can't yet, because you need a certain number of novels to get successful in a series. Though, mind you, my series has already been successful. I hate to brag, but it's already won 2 series awards, international series awards, and that's
Nice.
very rare. But the point is that you need that backup. And then I'm going to come back to this series we're talking about and hopefully do a thriller finale.
Okay, okay. It's a standalone series, so each novel stands alone. But
Yes, I believe in that, because I think otherwise you're cheating people.
mm,
And it's the same with my Austen series. You shouldn't have to feel, oh, I needed to read that first. I hate that.
yeah, it's kind of hard to jump into book 4 in a 7 novel series. Yeah, yeah. Without giving too much away, Ghost Music has a striking resolution. How did you
Thank you.
decide on the ending for William and the cello? And if readers could take away one thing from the book, what would it be?
I think the cover is a bit of a clue.
I love the
If I'm
cover.
honest. Thank you. I love the cover also. But I think it is a bit of a clue that there is something not only haunted about the cello, but something that needs to be completed about the cello. I think that what William did was completely William, and I honor him for it. I don't think I could have done it. It is a good conclusion, though I say it myself. I feel that the book has moved on from the first book, in many ways, I think the characters have deepened. To understand them completely, you probably do need to read While the Music Lasts. And it may be a more artistic book, more literary book, but ghost music is much more powerful for me and much more psychologically interesting. And I feel that the end of the book, though it's left to some degree up to the reader to decide, is the only way it could have ended.
Mm.
And I'm proud of it. I think it's one of the best things I've ever done. I think he was weak in many ways, but strong in so many other ways. And I feel that's very typical of humanity.
Yeah. Okay. Did you have anything else you wanted to add today for our listeners?
No, not particularly. I've really enjoyed chatting to you. It's been great.
Okay. Well, yeah, Alice, thank you so much for joining me. I love learning more about your work. As I said, I know we've reviewed several of your novels over the years, so it's nice to finally connect.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me today for my interview with Alice McVeigh, author of Ghost Music. You can learn more about the author and her work at alicemcveigh.com. And be sure to check out our other interviews at InsideScoopLive.com.